Hey guys, so part of my Whatever I Want Wednesdays is going to be devoted to a new series called Tipsy Interviews, in which I invite industry professionals into my studio and I apply them with their alcohol of choice, loosen them up, and then ask them questions about working in the industry. I have a couple of interviews lined up. I have a great menswear designer next time. I have a fabric sales rep. And if you guys if you guys are into it, I will pursue more interviews with other people in different roles in the industry. This first interview is with the brilliant, amazing Briana Kranz. She is a fashion illustrator and a fellow teacher at the university that I teach at. I'm going to show you guys this awesome tutorial that we shot in my studio where she shares with you guys her approach to fashion illustration. And then I'm going to interview her all about, her life as an illustrator and about teaching, because she's an awesome teacher as well. Like, all the students I have that have had her in a previous class sing her praises. Keep in mind during this video that Briana is an illustrator and not a designer. I'm a designer who illustrates, and that dictates a lot of my style and my methods. But Briana is an illustrator by trade. And so her approach is really different. Her opinions on what good fashion illustration is supposed to look like, all these things are different. And that's the point. I wanted to bring a different point of view into the studio so that you guys can hear from intelligent, talented people who are very different from me. I hope you laugh, even half as much as I did. I laughed so hard that I lost my eyeliner. Enjoy the video. Hey guys, so today we have a guest in the studio. We have kick-ass fashion illustrator and teacher Briana Kranz with us. Woo! All right. Yeah, there is some wine involved. You don't know what's in here. It's a secret. Hi.
Hi.
What's up?
Nothing.
How's the wine?
It is delicious.
It's very pretty color.
And conveniently, it's like my favorite kind. So thank you.
We aim to please on this YouTube channel.
I'm very happy right now. And snacks too.
Snacks. Yeah, people are always like, how do Korean people drink so much? I'm like, we always eat while we drink. We don't just sit there and do shots. No, we always have anju. We always are like,
you sit down, you automatically get snacks.
Day drinking. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
Right.
Somewhere.
Like,
probably where you are. It's probably 5 p.m. where you are. You don't have like a lot of subscribers in Saudi Arabia and India?
You do?
I do.
That's awesome.
That was a real surprise.
You're spreading globally.
I'm like a virus. I'm a fashion virus armed with mechanical pencils because I'm too lazy to sharpen pencils.
Those are the best. I miss those.
All right. Briana, please introduce yourself, what you do, why you do it.
All right. My name's Briana Kranz. I am an illustrator, a fashion illustrator specifically. I do a range of work from literal fashion illustrations to portraits to florals, which tends to be my more personal stuff. My work's very direct, I would say, and organic. I use a lot of mixed media. That's pretty much it. It's developed into, which I'm happy about, like my own thing, I feel. I think it's pretty unique and it's really fun. It's very in the moment. So there's mistakes in my work. There's, just really what I'm seeing. There's a lot of fun color and experimentation. Yeah, that's what I do. Fashion illustration.
So how did you get into fashion illustration? Did you go to school?
So I've always loved drawing and art. I did art in like middle school, high school. It's like all I wanted to do. So I decided to go to the Academy of Art in San Francisco. I'm not really sure what I wanted to do. So I actually started off as graphic design and did that first semester and realized it was way too much computer time. It wasn't enough interaction like with my hands and drawing and all that. So I switched to graphic illustration, which was half illustration, half graphic design. And then like my last year of college, they canceled that major. So I ended up going into just illustration But the thing with illustration, I loved my degree. Great foundation, really strong program, but I never was like super fulfilled in my projects. And so for electives, I went towards fashion illustration at the academy and met some really wonderful instructors, one in particular who ended up becoming my mentor. And I would just go to her classes all the time. I would essentially teacher aide for her, and she taught me a lot. And that was essentially what I decided I wanted my main kind of illustration work to be, which wasn't really what my department was all about, but it was kind of cool because I found my own little thing that I was interested in.
I think that really helps, though, in any field to like kind of pursue the thing that not everyone else is doing.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I feel like it made me work harder. I was more invested in just the skill level that I needed for that. So I would think like outside of the box. I'd be like, well, I'd probably be better at like rendering shoes if I took like a still life painting class, so I would take a still life painting class. Or I really need, because of fashion illustration, it's clothes. It's like I really need to understand drapery. So I took more clothes figure drawing classes. And I agree. I think because I was so like separated from most students in my major, I ended up kind of creating my own little thing.
So what is your approach and process? What is your favorite thing to draw?
My favorite.
Those are like two completely separate questions. You can answer whichever one you like.
My favorite approach and process is actually kind of very similar to my demo. I feel like when I follow the steps, I get my strongest work. So it's about really seeing like the big picture in that overall silhouette. And then from there, it's breaking it down very simply and almost abstractly in some areas of it. I really love fine art in general. And so when I really enjoy it when I can get like, when you look at like really wonderful oil paintings and there's like 2 brush strokes and it looks 3-dimensional. I try to kind of go for that approach where it's like a flat local color and a little bit of shape and then a little bit of line. It's like a balance of all of those to get something that feels realistic but also stylized. So I would say that's in the end like my approach and what I would like.
That's like the hardest thing to do is to like get the maximum impact with the minimal brush strokes.
Yeah. Simplicity.
So, lofty goals over here.
I want something beautiful but simple and balanced. Yeah. And that's what I really actually enjoy about it. It's a struggle. I'm constantly challenged when it comes to when I get a really successful drawing. It's because I struggled and I was nervous and scared the whole time. You're scared to put down that brush stroke, or you're scared or worried to put down that shape because you don't know if it's going to come out right. But what I like about that process is I have to trust myself and trust my skills and just do it. And if it doesn't work, I do it again. So that's essentially what my process is. It's kind of just making mistakes and
doing it and doing it and practicing and practicing and practicing.
Yes.
And yeah.
I mean, when I do like professional work, I probably do like 15, 20 versions and then I present them with 3. So it comes down to really just refining your process for sure.
I think that's the big struggle I have as a freelancer when I take on projects. It's like what you get is it's not all the things that I worked on. That internet meme of the whole glacier where you see the tip of the iceberg above the water, but underneath is like this giant. It's like that, I feel like, with illustration work where, I need this end result. And then, we'll present you with the end result. But we did like 20 rough sketches and tries to get there. And what you're paying for is that practice and the experience.
Why wouldn't you like relate that to like design though? Like how many patterns do you have to do before you get it?
Girl, don't get me started on that.
No, it's like, and I think that's also something that like students forget. They think they're going to get in their first pattern the right thing, or in their first drawing what's perfect. And that's just not what the process is.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like people are like, how come I'm not getting it? And it's like,
you have to do it 100 times and then you'll get it.
Yeah, like, do you know how old I am and how long I've been drawing and how many, like, I love it during demo when I'll do something and they're like, wow, you make it look so easy. How come I can't do that? I'm like,
I know.
I've been drawing since I was 5 years old, and I am 112 years old right now. You know, Asian don't raisin. And so, yeah, I draw every single day. If I can't make it look easy for you guys, I'm not doing my job.
No, exactly. And I think that's something that doesn't always like make it through, is that I've drawn this hand in this position hundreds of times, and that's why it's easy. Or like I've drawn this drape on a shoulder in a shirt hundreds of times, and that's why I can do it, and that's why I understand it. And I think people will take that practice for granted, for sure. And that process is a huge part of being creative, whether you're graphic design or design, like fashion design or illustration or anything creative. There is that gnarly process that you have to take to get to that great end result.
In my Thursday class a couple of weeks ago, I was saying, you know, because we're working on this project where I tell them to keep documenting their progress and to also document their mistakes. And one of my students was like, I don't want to look at that again, Zoe. Like, I don't want to go back and be like, oh, look at that thing I messed up on. I'm like, no. That's the best part.
It is.
The best parts. Because if you don't remind yourself of the mistakes you made, like, you're just going to keep making them.
Exactly. That's what I always tell them. It's like, we draw really directly in fashion illustration. You do not erase, which is very terrifying for a lot of people. But I'm like, if you stare at that mistake over and over and over again that you made, you're not going to do it again. It's a really fast way to learn, to like sit there and stare and be like, I did that on accident and I hate it. You're not going to make that same mistake. I make mistakes drawing all the time.
What? You're not perfect? Shut up. Don't tell anyone. We'll get fired.
I've had demos where I totally like, I just mess it, the whole thing up. And I'm like, see, even I can't draw a face sometimes. Like, look at that nose. Look how horrible it looks. And then I'll do it again.
Oh my God.
You know?
So what do you do when you have a bad drawing day?
You have to power through it. It sounds so lame, but I have bad drawing days all the time. I mean, I teach 5 days a week, and I have freelance work on top of that.
Yeah.
And then I try to draw to make me happy, like my own personal stuff. And it's like, you just have bad drawing days, and you have to work through it. So for me, my thing with illustration especially is like, if I drew one thing that I like today, I did a good job. That's it. Because you can't put like those insane expectations on your day. But there are just bad days, and those bad days all depend on like how you're feeling emotionally. If you're tired, if you're uninspired, if you're overworked, like burnt out, you know, that all affects your drawing process or your creative process in general. So for me, I will sit there and I'll stare at fashion illustrators, or I'll stare at architecture or photography or fashion or anything that inspires me. I feel like that's the best way to do it, or just to not think about it. If you have the opportunity to like take a day off or step away from something for an amount of time, I think that's really important, because the creative process is so up and down anyway.
Yeah, I'll try to shift between projects. Like if I'm painting something and the painting is not working, I will, you know, switch to another project where I'm drawing, or where I'm like more like organizing the first stages of a project. So I'm kind of like shifting gears for a little bit, and then I can come back to the painting or
mixing
whatever.
Media helps a lot. Trying something else. Like if you're doing something in marker and the marker's not working, like trying gouache or watercolor is a nice way to switch it up for sure. But yeah, that's what's nice about having so much work to do all the time. You can be like,
that's exactly it.
I can't do this like, right now.
Okay, I'm going to work on my lesson plans because I can't draw right now.
Definitely.
Yeah, let me prepare lecture, and then I'm doing that stitching homework.
And if you think of like a student, you know, like if you are just like failing, like your sketchbook work or your croquis are not coming out, like switch to your liberal arts class, go and do your English homework or your history homework, and then come back to it. Like it is important to take those breaks, you know, and to switch,
let your brain
focus,
you know, rattle around. Rattle your brain around.
This is something that I know my higher level students hate me for, but I make them go draw on location all the time, and they hate it. But the ones who like understand how good it is for you to like leave your apartment or your dorm, like really benefit from it. And you know, like it's super important to get away, and to leave what you're used to and to explore something or to go outside and get the sun on you and to see a tree or like watch a bird eat a bug. Like, it's really weird sounding, but it's good for you, you know?
I agree.
It's good to be outside.
I also agree that I think that it's good to take a break from drawing people wearing clothes.
Yes.
Like, this is what we do, okay? She's a fashion illustrator. I'm a fashion designer who draws things.
Yes.
And yet, I still think that we should all take breaks from drawing people wearing clothes. What's your favorite thing to draw?
My favorite thing? I mean, it's definitely a figure. And I like a figure with like graphic elements, so like stripes or a pattern, and just movement in general. So someone with attitude is more fun. But I do like faces, and I do like shoes. So I guess in general, fashion.
Not your cat? I know. Okay.
I should draw them more often.
Because seriously, that one illustration of the back of your cat was like my hands down absolute favorite. Like, I'm not saying like you're not great at clothes and stuff, but
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but that cat, that was a really good one.
I know, it was one of my favorite ones.
Yeah,
yeah.
Was really good.
I really captured her too. That's definitely one of my favorite ones, and she's my favorite thing in the whole world. So
don't tell your husband or your future husband.
Yeah, he knows. He already knows.
He already knows. Hi, Briana. What are you painting for us today?
I'm going to do a fashion illustration.
All right.
Before I start fashion illustration in general, I feel is simple and specific. I think those are like nice things to think about while you're doing a fashion illustration. It's also supposed to be fast, or not like speedy, but you're not supposed to spend like 2 hours on a fashion illustration, especially when you're working from something like an image. So supplies wise, what I'm using or what I like to use as far as paper goes, I like Bristol. I like the smooth Bristol. It's better for liquid media, and it can take, you know, a lot of aggression. But in general, you know, I can use like an oil pastel or ink or watercolor on the smooth Bristol. This is my favorite brand. It's not necessarily the one you need to get, but I do think a smooth Bristol is the best way to go. I use it professionally and for fun. So that, I have my reference photo here. I liked it just because there's nice angles in the shoulder and the hips, and the stripes are always a fun graphic element, so it's a little bit interesting, and we'll play around with that. I use mainly watercolor, a little bit of gouache. It's all kind of mixed in here. This is my own palette, but you can use like a basic Crayola set that you can get at like the drugstore. No big deal. Watercolor is pretty cool that way. You just want to be really specific with the colors that you're mixing. So don't use just like a straight up red. Use like a more specific mixture of like red, orange, or something like that. Okay. I also, see with the watercolors, I like to use 2 brushes. So I have a square brush, and I also have a pointed round brush. These really let you do anything that you want as far as the size goes. I can fill in a shape, or I can get a really nice thin defined line or detail. Okay, so those are awesome. With my watercolors, I also like to use oil pastels. They're water resistant because they're oil based. So it adds a really nice, interesting effect, because when you go over it with the water, it repels it. Okay, so I have a variety of those. For my line, there's 2 options, especially if you're new to something like ink. The brush pen, this one is by Micron, I think, or Pigma, okay? It doesn't have to be this brand, but what's nice about this in general is the pointed tip. It's really flexible, so it's gonna bend. This can get you used to a rounded brush, pointed brush, similar to this, okay? Which, when it comes to ink, I like to use this thing. I don't know what it's called because it's in Japanese, but you can get it at anything like Daiso or like a Japanese stationery store. What's really nice is this unscrews, and it's the opposite direction because it's Japanese, and you can buy refills. It's really easy to take places with you. It doesn't really explode in your bag, but this has that pointed brush to it. I'm obsessed with these. I use these for everything. So I will be using this today. But if you're uncomfortable with this, I do think this little brush pen is a nice thing to start with. First things first is the silhouette, which is essentially the outside shape So if she was standing in front of a sunset, you would only see the outside shape of her, the silhouette. You don't see any inside detail. For me personally, it's a really great place or great way to start a drawing. So really focusing on just that silhouette shape in the very beginning. Most of your details should be last because you don't want to spend a ton of time drawing a wonderful face and then you get down to the bottom of drawing and totally mess it up. So I think the silhouette in general.
Oh, I've never done that.
Really? I know.
Never, ever.
I mean, even I need to remember. I mean, I there's times I'll get too involved in the face and I'll have to start all over. So, silhouette first. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to use the ink. Okay. This is a little bit, for the most part, water resistant, so I can go over this with watercolor afterwards. I'm just going to have my reference nearby. I'm going to start at the top. Okay, and I'm using kind of different pressure so you get varied line, like some different thickness. And this doesn't have to be exact, right? You're doing this for fun. It's kind of your own take on what you're seeing, but mainly following the outside shape. So the hair goes down to her collar or the necklace, and then I see some of her shoulder. And you don't have to go all the way down, but I'm just going to take my time and be really specific with all the small details I'm seeing. Come back this way. Okay, this shoulder is a little bit higher, so it is nice to kind of relate what you already have drawn to what you are drawing. So here, just pull up a little bit of that shoulder. Okay, and this is, you can go ahead and start adding some more information from here. It's kind of up to you. This hand is a little bit lower. Okay, so from here, what I like to do from that main silhouette is go into smaller shapes. So if you're looking at something like that whole outside shape, a smaller shape would be like her hair shape, right? Because you can just break down that larger shape into something a little less complicated. It could be her necklace or the V-neck that's happening here, you know, the open shirt. So I'm just going to come in and again, still being really specific with that shape, just break it down. Okay, I see a little bit of her jawline here. Her neck has some nice movement. Go into like some of these shapes. Don't worry if it's not perfect. It's kind of the cool thing about fashion illustration is no one's totally gonna know all those mistakes. So I'm just jumping in. Here's my V. Still being specific. Okay, and from here I'm going to stop because I like to incorporate some shape with color. So we're going to move into watercolor from here. Okay, so I'm going to use my square brush. I think the square brush is nice, as scary as it can be, because it forces you to be kind of loose. So you're not going to get something super specific all the time, but it's going to add like a little bit of life to your work. So I'm just going to come in, I'm doing just basic. There's like a little bit of brown here. I'm using like a burnt sienna, which I can actually kind of use everywhere. Okay, if I want like a shadow of that, I can add like a purple or a blue, something a little bit cooler. Just pump that color up. I think I tend to use watercolor differently. A lot of people are very like delicate and pastel-y with their watercolor, and I really dislike that. I think it's super wimpy and kind of like, I'm too scared to really, you know, put down this color. So use less water if you want that brighter, bolder color in there. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of continue down. Fortunately for me, there's a lot of burnt sienna everywhere in this illustration. Okay, but things like stripes, because they're graphic, I can just follow the shape and it's going to show the body underneath and it's going to show the fold. So if you're specific with just one stripe, you can get something that really helps define the body underneath. This doesn't have to be perfect. You don't always have to get every stripe. But this is kind of a fun, easy way to help define some of what's going on here. Okay, there are some areas in the reference where you see darker or bolder sienna. So if you go back with that, it helps pump it up and adds a little bit of depth. My way through here. I'm going to extend this. The arm was too skinny. That's fine. Don't worry about making mistakes. It's kind of just a part of it. Okay, here we have all these weird folds, and by following that curve or that wraparound, it's going to help add form and dimension. It's going to make it look 3D. So just be specific. Okay, again, you don't really need every single one. So from here, I can also look at the shape of her pants because they're pretty flat. When it comes to shape in general, I like to think of just a local color, which is like the overall color of what it is that you're looking at. So the pants are kind of like a burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson or like a red or a pink. So I'm just going to add and pump up that color a little bit. And that local color, again, is just that overall color. So I'm just going to do like a flat shape this way. I'm not worrying about shadows or anything, and I'm still keeping the silhouette really specific. I need more pink. It's not enough. There you go. So here, I know like her hand, I can kind of see. I'm just going to fill in that shape. The shirt's here, so I can just go around. Okay, you can take some water if you want it to fade out a little bit and just kind of pull it. It'll lighten your color if you want. And while it's still wet, there, I can still drop in some color to bulk it up a little bit. So maybe you want like a little bit more pink in an area or like that. You can drop it in. And what's cool about watercolor is it's going to dry very strange. So you get this interesting texture. If you're really being kind of smart about it, you can use watercolor to create some really interesting textures. So things like fur, you know, this overall wet on wet technique, which is what we just did, like putting down just plain water or wet watercolor and then dropping in more wet color, wet on wet, can give you some really cool textures, okay? Now what I can also do, because this is still wet, is go in with my pastels, the oil pastels. And because they're oil-based, they reflect the water or repel it. So I can go in here and kind of draw in with line. I'm still being specific like I was before, but it kind of just pushes the watercolor away. You can also do this first and then go in with that watercolor. But this can be kind of a fun technique. Okay, I'm going to pull a little bit just because I want this to feel kind of cohesive. A little bit of this color up here. Just doesn't feel too random. Okay, more shapes. So the necklace, we have some shape. Let's go back to the ink for a minute. I'll leave some space for some color in there. This one's a little darker. Okay, I can start to define more stuff. So it's kind of nice to mix up your media, or like what you're using, and kind of go back and forth. So button, some small detail, some direction of hair. Don't go cray cray. Some people put in like 1,000 strands of hair, and that's really just not necessary. People do that with eyelashes too. Too many eyelashes. Okay, so
my favorite are the eyelashes that stick straight up.
Like this. It's like, ugh, I'll have to draw it for you later because it drives me crazy. You don't need 1,000 eyelashes. Okay, so now we're going into the face. And before I jump into like the features of the face, I think it's nice to look at the shadow shapes in the skin, okay? So if you look at your reference, and this sounds very strange, but if you kind of blur your eyes a little bit, you're gonna notice there's darker areas on the face, and that tends to be like along the cheek, underneath the jawline, and even here between the eye and the brow, okay? Throughout the figure, you can see even in areas like where the hand crosses over here, where a sleeve sits, you're gonna see some of those shadows, and I think those are a nice way of adding form. And it's still, just by adding those, you're keeping it really simple. So for skin tone in general, I like to do, and Zoe's definitely more of the expert on this than I am, but skin tone for me is like a combination of alizarin crimson, which is like kind of pink, a little bit of burnt sienna, so like a brown, and then a little bit of blue or purple, and then just water it down. And you can adjust for different skin tones by kind of pushing certain ones of those colors.
I do something similar in gouache.
Yeah.
Yeah. The crimson and the burnt sienna and a little bit of blue for Caucasian skin tones.
Yes. And then if you can change up that ratio. Okay. So I'm just going to jump in. And the face can be scary. Everyone wants to draw a beautiful face. I say if it looks like a face, you did a great job. Okay, so from here...
Oh my god, I just spit out my...
It's true. Okay, so I'm just jumping in. You can put it where you think the eyebrows are. I'm just kind of placing them here. Again, there's like this weird pointed shadow shape here. These will help define like the bridge of the nose. From the front view, you don't want to like draw the lines on the sides of the nose, so I look for like a little shadow here, even underneath the nose works. And you can kind of jump in where you think the upper lip is. And again, this does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look exactly like the model. Okay, I'm gonna do this cheek part, but I don't want this to feel too hard. Like you don't want the line to be super, super sharp here. So with a drier brush, I'm gonna come in and lift that edge. So I'm just kind of wiping it on my tissue, lightening it, and you can always drop a little bit more in there if you want. Okay, so I'll come back with this underneath her neck. Try not to close the jawline off if you're doing something like a fashion illustration, because it tends to flatten the face. Okay, sometimes you'll see like a collarbone, cleavage or something. So from there you can start to drop in more color, like maybe a little more pink underneath the neck, or if you want to drop color in for lip color. Okay, things like the lips, the mouth is soft, so I like to avoid putting a lot of line there. I think it can really flatten the face for the most part. So I'm just kind of looking at the overall shape. Okay, I do see like a little bit of purples and blues, so you want to be specific with your shadows. Sometimes you'll see other colors in there. Okay, so from here, I can go in with my ink, or if you want, you can use that brush pen we talked about, and I'm just going to do things like define the eyebrows. This is still a little bit wet, so it's going to bleed. You know, pay attention to the direction. The eyebrow usually has 2 angles and thickness to it. And think of the eyebrow and the eye as friends. They hang out together. You want to think about how they kind of relate. So I want to make sure I'm lining up like the brow with the corner of the eye, because sometimes it's further out or it's further in. And think of the eye as a shape. Otherwise it's easy to get like animation eyes. Okay.
No Sailor Moon eyes.
No. No, not in fashion either, like especially. Okay, there's like heavier shape for the lids here. Okay, you can break the shape up for the bottom lid a little bit just because of lashes and everything. And then look for that upper lid. I'm going to put a little bit of a line there. And the nose, keep as simple as possible. And then in between the lips is really important. It helps add some shape. I'm just going to look at the shadow shapes in her mouth and do not draw the teeth, or you get some scary faces. Okay, if you want to, you can come in and define this a little bit more. It doesn't have to be with black, but just try and keep it simple. And then I'm going to jump in and add some more color to her face. So in shadows like here, I see actually a little bit of red, like a red violet. So you can come in and just add a little bit, be specific. Don't be afraid to pump up color, but think about, like, there aren't really green people, so don't put like green in the skin tone. Okay, so then from here, if you want to add some shadows in there, you can. I like to, in her shirt, I like to keep it simple. I'm just going to go over with simple blue to help push some of this movement. Maybe a little there. Maybe I'll add more stripes, and then I'll be pretty much finished. So this brush is nice for simple details. This is wet still, so it's going to bleed, but sometimes it's kind of cool. And that's pretty much it. You can put shadow shapes in the pants too, now that we're finishing up. So I'll put like purple. Keep it really simple though. You don't need like every single fold. You just want something to get the idea across. I'm mixing a little bit of the local color that I used for the pants into the shadow so they don't feel too different. And then from here I'll just, again, you can kind of blur your eyes and look where the shadows are really standing out. And I'll use this thing just so you guys can see, just to define this a little bit. And ta-da!
My viewers always want to know about different media, brands that you like, what you look for when you're checking out new media or buying new stuff. Can you, like, we did the tutorial, can you tell us about like your painting kit? And
in general, I would say, honestly, you can do the same thing with cheaper options. Like when you look at watercolor, especially. I had a teacher, Bill Sanchez, who does beautiful watercolor work with the cheapo Crayola set you can buy at Target or Walgreens or the drugstore. Like, he's done beautiful stuff. Pentel is very reasonable, a good brand, but very reasonable. And that's like my favorite brand for oil pastels. I think you want to spend more money on things like brushes that will last you a long amount of time.
I say that.
Brushes are like an investment. It's just like the makeup brushes. You know, you don't buy cheap stuff.
Right.
I wanted to say a bad word.
We're all adults here, Kranz.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah.
You didn't tell me the bad words I'm allowed to say.
You know, I've already slipped like 6.
But, you know,
I think you're so used to how much I cuss that you didn't even notice them. Like, I know.
It's funny, too, because I'll say bad words in my class, and students are like, because I don't always do that. I usually filter. But definitely, I would say the thing to invest in is your paper and your brushes, because that's what's important.
So that kit you were working with, so you bought like an empty thing, and then
so it's just a tin. It's by Schminke. I think it's, I don't know,
German.
I think it's German.
Yeah.
And you know, that was like something I got for myself. It was definitely like I need a nice little case for my watercolors. I had a flat plastic palette that you can get at any art store that just like closes like this and opens like this, but it was pretty big, even folded. And I just didn't really like the way the paint mixed on it. Like it would always like dry really fast, or like spread out. I couldn't get like a nice deep, you know, area for the color. So
this plastic?
Yeah.
Okay, and this one is metal.
This one's metal. Yeah. It's actually tin with like ceramic on the inside, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So it's like those camping cups. You know, those nice mugs. It's like that similar kind of thing. So the inside's really smooth. And it's the thing is like with my watercolors, I still go back to colors I've already mixed. So like, I very rarely clean my whole tin. I like to go back from other projects, like to use those colors and, you know, grow from them. I'll add red to one they already used. So that tin in general, I'm really happy about. But you don't need to get like the whole schmieke set. Like I bought the empty tin, so I have paints that in there in the little squares that I had from college that I splurged on. I have some gouache in there. It's my own palette. It's stuff that I enjoy working with, and you know, it's all colors I've collected just because of experience.
But I use more gouache in my work than I do watercolors. For watercolors, I don't. It's practice, just like anything else.
I know, but do you use it like because okay, when I took a whole illustration class on gouache, and they were like, your gouache should be the texture of melted ice cream. Like, do you use it that way? Like very flat, or do you use it more like watercolor? I
use it in all the ways, and that's why I like it because of the versatility. Like, I just did a sequin tutorial where I use the gouache because that's the best way to get lighter colors on top of darker colors. Because we do that a lot when we're doing like print renderings.
Yeah.
How many prints have you seen where it's like pink flowers on like a black ground?
Yeah, you're not gonna like go around with
my god. I've seen students try to do that. I'm like,
that's a nice
that is not lovely. Sorry.
That is where the oil pastel comes in handy.
I am so gonna try that. I'm so excited to try that once you're gone.
Yeah.
But, so I can dick around and make mistakes without any witnesses.
Oh yeah, don't worry.
But yeah, so I love using it opaquely, especially in those circumstances. Also, I find that when I'm trying to do darker skin tones, there's no amount of like watercolor that makes it look right. I don't know. But like darker skin tones just need to be more opaque.
Yeah.
And so I love gouache for that. But I'll also water it down like crazy and use it just like a watercolor.
Well, that is what's really great about it.
For watercolor, I just have the Winsor Newton Cotman series.
That's amazing. I would say a lot of my
because they're not that expensive.
No, they're not that expensive.
But the quality is really nice.
When you don't need a fat tube.
No.
You don't even know if you're gonna like the paint, first of all. So I think the Cotman series is really nice because they're really thin. You know,
and we don't do like big drawings like ever.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
No, you don't need the big, expensive tubes of paint.
That I will buy a tube of gouache this big, and it'll last like, except for the white, like it'll last me literally years.
Yeah.
So if you want to invest in brushes, like what do you look for? Is there a specific like animal bristle?
I like the real stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Me too.
I don't like the synthetic brushes. I think the squirrel hair is too soft for me.
I didn't like the squirrel.
No,
I have sable.
Sable. Sable is my favorite. That's what I have. Those two, the square brush that I use in the demo and the pointed round brush, they're both sable. I mean, I think any artist, whether it's like oil painter, like a fine art person, or a fine artist, or illustrator, designer, anyone who's creative and uses a brush is going to tell you that the natural hair brushes are the best ones, and they're going to last you the longest too.
Yeah, I do get the cheap, super crusty ones, but that's for texture work. That's not for actual painting.
I can see that too. Yeah. I have like little teeny ones from oil painting that I use with watercolor to get texture. So I can see that for sure. But if you want a nice, smooth, beautiful line or a nice flat wash, the synthetic, not the good natural.
I will edit that out for a fee.
Oh, damn it. Oh.
Tell us about your live illustration events, because I've never done anything like that, and it sounds absolutely terrifying. And so every time you do one and post about it, I shake a little bit on the inside. I'm like, wow, better you than me, girl.
It is, the thing, it's terrifying. I stress out about it so much, but when I get there, it's fine. It's one of those things where, that's an example of if you want to get better, you need to challenge yourself. Those scared the crap out of me. I stressed about it the whole week, and then I get there and I'm like, why was I nervous? This is fine. Mm-hmm. If it's more portrait based, I definitely get more nervous because there's the pressure of getting a likeness. So making it look like the person, which normally I don't really have a problem doing. But there's always I probably do in a 2-hour event, I can do about 20 illustrations, 20 portraits.
Wow.
And first of all, it's exhausting, but it's intimidating. And I would say out of those 20, there's maybe 2 I disappoint. Mm-hmm. It's always going to happen. I have to just accept it's part of it. But it's intimidating. Plus, it's hard. They're at a party. Everyone's at a party, so they're drinking, they're talking to their friends, and I have to draw their face. Mm-hmm. So it's nonstop moving. And I think that's something even in my class I try and tell my students, you're not always going to have, a perfectly posed model in the view that you want. They're always going to be moving or something. That's probably one of the most challenging things. And for me, I'm not always the most vocal person. When it comes to being at an event with a stranger and drawing, it's very hard for me to be stop moving. If it was my student, I would be like, hey, you, stop. You're a model. You're not supposed to move. But when I'm drawing a person at a party with a drink in their hand, I don't do that.
I'm a very vocal person, but I would feel hard pressed to do that in that setting where we're you're supposed to be enjoying yourself, but you know what? You're moving too much. Yeah, so stop enjoying yourself.
There's a formula for everything. Just say it in a nice way. So,
yeah, you're definitely more diplomatic than I am.
But yeah, it's terrifying. But when I'm there in the moment, I am thrilled. I'm excited. I'm nervous. And I'm challenged, and at the end, I'm very happy. It's exhausting.
Is it a little bit like a performance high?
It is.
Because you are performing.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. My years of piano paid off.
I'm a teary laugher. That's why I usually don't wear eye makeup to school. Because my students will eventually say something where I'm dying. Okay.
Critique always has those funny moments. I love it when my students can laugh at their work. I think that's really important.
That is it's really healthy attitude to cultivate, is kind of separate yourself from your work a little bit, to be critical and also to not take yourself too seriously.
Yes, I agree. I do a lot of group critiques, and especially in level 2 is my favorite class to teach, by far, because they're coming from a foundation and they're learning all this different media and really experimenting. So you really see some students push themselves and challenge themselves. And that's a class where I love it when we have a good group that's really talkative about their work and interactive. And they can sit there and be like, what media did you use? Or why does your foot look like that? Why that doesn't look like a foot? Everything's beautiful, but this looks like a banana.
Oh my God, I have that student.
It's
I have this student. She has been growing and progressing all throughout the semester in nice trajectory of improvement, but her feet. Every week I call her out on it.
Your homework is insane, but in a good way. It's an intensive, essentially. That's how they should just look at it.
Did you see that picture I posted of the busted down bathroom door?
Yes,
I did. Did you see the comments from my students?
Was that your student?
No, that's what my students said. They're it was probably one of your students stressed out from how much homework you gave them. My guess is wear and tear, but it's hilarious how my students were immediately yeah, my students were immediately that was one of your students. I'm how dare you? My students are stressed out. Ever.
Honestly, though, stress is a normal thing. Mm-hmm. It does not get easier when you leave school.
No.
It does not. It gets worse.
Because you are stressed out, you have work, and you have to pay your own rent.
Exactly.
There are these YouTube viewers. They're I wish you were my teacher. I'm no, you don't. No, you don't. And I say that right to them, whether it's a comment or right on video. I'm no, you don't. You don't want me as a teacher because I am the worst.
You have to be mean in some of those classes, though. I think that's part of the learning experience. When I think about, instructors who really influenced me, they were my mean teachers because I actually learned something. They weren't my friend teacher.
Yeah.
Or like my sweet teacher. I love my sweet teachers, but my mean teachers, the ones that were hard on me, were the ones that really, really taught me something, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess. That's me wanting to be memorable.
I know.
Students love you. They're like, yeah, Briana, she's the bomb. When I started my YouTube channel, I have been learning some interesting things, some interesting vocabulary from my viewers who are like totally younger than I am.
Okay.
Like I said, the youngest viewer that I know of is 13, which like blows my mind. Hello, 13-year-old students. So someone had tweeted at me saying that I was so slept on, and I didn't know what that meant. And I was like, I hope that's a compliment.
I know.
The context of the tweet was very complimentary, so I didn't get offended. But I looked it up. Actually, my students told me that it means underrated. Who do you think is the most underrated illustrator?
In my opinion right now, as far as like current illustrators go, I would say Bill Donovan, and that's spelled BILDONOVAN. Bill Donovan. He's incredible.
You introduced me to him.
Oh, did I?
And afterwards, I started following him on Instagram.
His Instagram is insane.
Oh my God, I love his stuff.
I think he's underrated because he so clearly uses different parts of his brain. Like he challenges himself constantly. So when you look at his sketchbook, it's very linear.
Mm-hmm.
It's all line. It's very direct. It's all based on silhouettes, the outside shapes. And he's not sketching. He's just directly translating what he's seeing. And then you look at his more fashion illustration work, and it's all shape. Mm-hmm. And to jump between those two it's very difficult. And it takes a lot of skill and focus, and that's something that I really appreciate about his work. He does a lot of the wet techniques, which I briefly explained in my demo.
Oh my God, I love wet technique, but it's so hard to get it right, like every single time.
No, totally, and it depends on the paper you're using. That's one thing I would actually like to ask Bill, Mr. Donovan, and he's doing a lot of live drawing. He's like flying around drawing for Dior. Underrated.
Yeah, that whole live drawing thing totally terrifies me, but I would like to fly all over the world and teach.
Yeah.
Run workshops.
It's not that different from teaching, to be honest. There's just no talking. Except, I have conversations with the model, but it's not as intimidating as you would think it would be.
Sure.
But this is the girl saying that, and I psych myself out that whole week before.
A lot of my viewers are either high school students getting ready for college or college students. Do you have any advice specifically for high school students? It's
hard for me because I feel like a big part of our society right now expects people to go to college. Mm-hmm. And I feel like at somewhere like where we teach, a lot of students are not ready to accept the information. Mm-hmm. So my big advice would be to go to college being willing to learn. And as strange as that might sound, it's really important to be open-minded and prepared to get feedback, good or bad, and also be ready to manage your time, because I think college takes a lot more time than people expect it to, especially at something like an art school. That's a big thing, is giving yourself enough time for a project, like realistically, especially if you want something that's going to turn out strong. Making school your priority is going to benefit you in the long run. All right. Any parting words for my beautiful viewers and yours? I would say whether it's fashion or anything creative in general, it's really important to be true to yourself. It's really important to be able to work with people, like you were just saying. It's really important to be driven to do what you're doing. And I think if you are realizing maybe you're not 100% into something, it's probably not what you should be doing. It's really important to have that passion. And if you have that passion, you need to make time to work for it. I think in general, it's going to be a better experience for you and a better experience for the people around you. I think that's probably my main comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's all about being yourself.
Yeah.
Ain't
no one else going to do it for you.
Nope. You got to be yourself. You got to trust your gut.
You are the best at being yourself, so you should do that. You guys, how awesome was that? How awesome is Briana? And she's so pretty. I love Briana, and if you want to follow her all over the internet, she is on Instagram at Briana Kranz. She is on Tumblr. She is all over the place. I'm going to drop all the links in the info box so that you guys can follow all of her beautiful eye candy and events and whatnot. Next up on Tipsy Interview, I have menswear designer Dahae Kim, creative director of Witch Kim, and hit the subscribe button if you want to alert for when that gets posted, and I will see you next time.